That looks like.
Shorter and shorter.
All right.
Oh, he didn't bring any food for it.
Got a big buy one, get one sale going on. Yeah. BOGO, right. Yeah. Yeah, I was invited to the, Barb kicked me out, said I've been banished,
Dark side.
the dark side.
Is he on, oh, he is on the dark side.
So I sat up in that seat where Penny is last week, and the sun was coming down. I mean, like everybody else was cool. I'm like sweating going.
You're like an angel with
I
the
did, it was terrible. I moved back by where Chris was sitting. I was
He'd
just like,
like to be in the light.
it was unbelievable. I was like, whew.
No Sanchez and no Hanson. They online?
We have a quorum? I think we do, right? All right, it's 2:30. I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Kane County CARES Act Allocation Committee. Ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Hanson, Kenyon,
Here?
Fraz,
Here.
Sanchez,
Here.
Sturgis,
Here.
Thomas.
All right, we have a quorum here. First item of business is approval of the August 24th minutes. Those are not in publication yet, so we'll defer that to next meeting. Public comment, we have a couple people that signed up in advance of the meeting to speak. First is Jennifer Chapman. Is Jennifer Chapman here or on the line?
Here, yes.
All right, you have the floor, 3 minutes, please.
Very
Go ahead.
good, thank you. Well, I have a struggling King County Small Business Learning Ascent. We've been tutoring kids in the area since 2002. And due to COVID, it's hard to employ staff and pay rent and serve the community. So I understand there's grants available to help businesses. And it looks like you're going to address how to apply for those grants. So I just wanted to make sure that I am able to apply for those grants. How would I know when to apply, how to apply, where to apply? Are those grants to be paid back? Are they temporary loans? Things like that.
All right, yeah, we did as a committee approve a business grant, as a board to a business grant program that is in the process of being publicized, and we are going to have an open application period that will occur in short order. I can answer a couple of your questions quickly. First, this is not a loan, it's a business grant. And there are certain criterias for the size of the business and the number of employees. But I have your phone number and your email address. And would it be okay if I have one of our staff email you after the meeting with the details so that you can get the specifics and then follow up with any questions you have?
Sure, that would be great.
All right, very good. I'll have our staff do that either late this afternoon or tomorrow morning.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you for calling in. All right, second is Mr. Iqbal signed up to speak. Is Dr. Iqbal, are you on the line? Hearing none. Is there anyone else in the audience that is here today that would like to address the committee? Mr. Hanson has arrived. We'll reflect that in the minutes. Hearing none, then we'll go on to discussion items for today's meetings. First item is status of funds. I know it's a busy day for the treasurer's office. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Good afternoon. As you noted, Mr. Rickards unable to be here. The due date for property taxes is tomorrow, so he's quite busy with that. The funds are the same as he reported last week. There has been no change.
Okay. Any questions for the treasurer's office? Hearing none, thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Good luck with the next 2 days. Appreciate everything you're doing. All right, next item is a discussion of the application process and timeframe. I know we've discussed and created a calendar for that process, but at last week's meeting, the representatives of the Metro West and the correspondence received since last meeting. All right. It included requests from the municipal applicants that we extend the time frame for their applying for their grant programs. And I've had a discussion with a couple of the mayors regarding this issue. Just obviously, it's in our mutual best interest to cooperate on this issue. And certainly that's the desire of the committee and the county board to do that. The original timeframe for the application for municipal applicants was this coming, a week from this, it's this Friday. I believe it's the 4th, September 4th. Sorry, my dates are mixed up. And that date was originally set at the request of the municipal applicants that we move forward as quickly as possible to get the funds allocated, to get the applications in, vet them, and then get the funds out. And so we moved quickly to do that, and now there's a request for extensions. The concern that we have from an administrative standpoint is that the municipal program is just one of multiple programs that we've approved, and every application that's received has to be reviewed and vetted and appropriately documented, and that significantly, or it will take a significant amount of our administrative staff that's going to work with us on this. So in an ideal world, we would begin the process earlier rather than later, because if everything came in at the end of the month or next month, there'd be a major crunch in terms of getting the applications vetted. I did have discussions with representatives of the state's attorney's office and staff regarding this as well. And they expressed, obviously a willingness to help, but expressed the concerns about the delay and how that will impact the ultimate result. Of course, the goal is to fund as many grant requests as possible within the time frame. And if there are applications that are submitted and all the funds aren't applied for or appropriately allocated by the end of the calendar year, then those funds go back to the federal government. And the goal is to get the money into the county and to its municipalities and businesses and not-for-profit organizations sooner rather than later. And the thought was that if we went through the first cycle and there were funds that were left over, we would have enough time to reallocate those among other qualifying uses before the money had to be refunded. So pushing this back creates that practical problem. Now, I think the basis for the request, when we started this process, the municipalities, most of them indicated to me that they were ready to apply right away and that they had the documentation in place. Now there's some indication that it may take them longer to do that. But I think the real reason for the request is the hope that the federal government will clarify via additional Treasury regulations the permissible uses of the funds to expand those uses beyond what someone may interpret would be permissible under the current regulations. And by pushing the process out, the hope would be that in the interim clarification would come and it would make the application process easier. I don't think anyone from our staff objects to making things easier. In fact, if the Treasury regulations were clarified in a way that we would like them to be clarified, the process of vetting applications would be much more streamlined. But that's the background of where we're at. I did discuss more specifically a concept that would maybe be a hybrid of the request in that, first of all, we are in a position to accept applications that are ready to be submitted and have them vetted now so that to the extent there's not a dispute as to the permissible uses of funds, we could get that money out right away. And we could leave that, that availability open and move the application date back for the ultimate, application timeframe for a period of days or weeks if it was the will of the committee to do that.
Sorry, bud.
In any event, that's the background of the issue. I know many of you have been contacted by your own mayors and village presidents. So I'll open it up to discussion for the committee of thoughts on how we address this issue. Mr. Surges.
Chairman Hosh, I believe last week when this came up, I was very much, we should not move this deadline. Since then, I believe my mic's on.
Okay.
Is that better? Since then, I have received those very same phone calls everybody else has from their mayors and administrators up and down my area, asking that we give this a push. I did explain that it was Mr. McMahon's office saying, we are really going to jam up against the deadline here. And they said, you really don't understand. So I made the promise that I would communicate that forward and change my support to help them out if I could. So.
Any other members? Mr. Fraz?
I had a meeting this morning with one of the larger fire districts, and they asked the same thing because they, even though they have a lot of their information ready to go, the webinar, I think, is scheduled for tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. So they're just concerned about, watching the webinar and being able to get everything in by Friday. So Metro West asked that we move from 9/4 to either the 11th or the 18th. So I would be for either of those. Maybe the 11th would be a good balance between state's attorney and our staff requirements and what people are asking for.
Mr. Berger, do you have any comments on this issue?
I just want to clarify, the deadline for fire districts is the 15th.
15th, okay. That was not what I was told this morning. Thanks.
Any other comments from the committee? Mr. Kenyon?
I want to give them as much time as possible, but I don't want to jam up our staff. They're going to have a lot of work, could be under a lot of pressure. If they could take applications and start on them, that would be a good compromise, but we can't keep moving the line in the sand back, the date. So if that's it, but the 11th is fine, but not the 18th. I got no calls. Nobody likes me.
You need a phone for that.
Right, yes. Any other comments? Mr. Hanson?
Good afternoon, thank you. I'm fine with this date being pushed back if it's within the realm of possibility for the staff to review this and do this. If they're qualifying, or to your hybrid idea, if there's qualifying expenses and a need that everyone can agree to right now, if it's possible for a second review, if that happens to not come until October the 15th, which is a date that's been built in as a possible, as the date that someone can modify their application, get the non-disputed expenses out the door if we can. And if it's possible for the treasurer to have a second run, if you will, for the municipalities and the other units of government, please do it.
Ms. Thomas, any thoughts?
I'll go along with the will of the committee, but staff already made it clear last week that they are already on a tight deadline and they need all the time that they've got on the calendar to process these applications. And there's already a deadline or a date built into the timeline for municipalities to revise their requests.
All right, Mr. Sanchez, what are your thoughts?
Well, I know Carpentersville has expressed a desire to have the time extended as well. It's this balance between what the staff and all the things we're trying to make happen with the deadline are able to happen. I'm not opposed to like the hybrid idea. If we have people that can start receiving funds now. I would like to see them receive the funds, but yeah, it's a hard call.
You know, from a big picture perspective, when the process began, the regulations were coming out very frequently and clarifications were being processed quickly. Now it seems on the national level, things tend to be stalled, and it may be related in part due to the national election process, which is unfortunate. It'd be nice if we could get a quick clarification. You know, the Illinois senators and representatives and those that represent our areas should be contacted by, you know, everyone here to try to get them to be induced to cooperate to get this clarification done. I don't think the cities would have a difficulty finishing their applications if the clarification they were looking for was obtained. Mr. Chairman, do you have any comments on this issue?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I guess my question is specifically to staff, and that question is, if we have the bulk of these come in that all then need to be pulled back and modified, that seems like it's twice as much work as it would be if we gave the extension. And with the extension, if there's a municipality that feels they can meet their standard without having to wait, there's nothing that precludes them. Their allocation is
Right.
waiting for them.
With the promise that their application will be processed first. And really, that's all we can do. Really. It's
Absolutely.
first come, first serve. Mr. Lovelace, comment?
Mr. Chairman, I do have to express, as I believe the state's attorney did last week, basically, everybody has to appreciate we're running 6 different programs with a drop dead date in December from the federal government. We're tight on this schedule now. Extending it out for one government unit is putting the review process now stacked on top of another allocation. It is really putting pressure on us. And I'm just expressing to you from a staff standpoint, no extensions on the dates that have been set.
All right, so we know staff's recommendation is that, and I know we set the policy here, and the staff is willing to accommodate any direction we give them, but you can, I mean, that's the dilemma we're faced with right now. We went as quickly as we could to get to this point, and now there's a perception that the funds that were expected may not be available because of the rules as drafted. So that's what we're dealing with. I don't know, you know, the suggestion of a week extension may be a compromise here, but I don't know what's that going to get us, or whether we'll be successful in getting the Treasury regulations clarified within that time frame. I would expect that if we do that, and there is no clarification, there'll be additional requests for extension, which is going to compound this issue. So I'll open up to the floor for a motion if someone desires to make one with respect to the extension of the application date for municipalities. For this is the government, the cities and villages, essentially. Mr. Fraz?
I'll make a motion to extend the deadline from September 4th to September 11th.
Okay. There's a motion. Is there a second? Mr. Surges seconds. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Hanson?
It's really more of a question and a discussion for the October the 15th date. I'm sorry, it's more of a question and discussion for the October the 15th date as a modification deadline. Whether if it's September the 4th or September the 11th, it's my understanding that an allocation that we made on a per capita amount will still be available in full, even if this date's extended and let's say a municipality that's entitled to $1 million only has requests for $700,000. Can they continue to, or I should say, will they have that chance to capture the remaining $300,000 between whatever our new deadline is and October the 15th?
So you're asking if the municipalities under the current program can supplement their request?
Up to their allocated amount. If they can't find a way to do that,
Right.
whether again, September the 4th, September the 11th, can they supplement that balance between the deadline and the October the 15th modification date?
Mr. Berger or Mr. Lovelace, you have comment on that?
My understanding that the extension only applies to extending the application deadline to September 11th. It doesn't affect any other dates that are established by the committee and the program. And so the answer to that would be yes, until October 15th. They could amend or supplement or, make another request. Yes, the only date that I understand the committee is expressing to change is the application date from the 4th to the 11th.
All right, any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Hanson,
Yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Franz,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Sturgis,
Yes.
Thomas,
No.
O'Shea.
Yes. Motion carries. All right, the next item was just a placekeeper for timing of distribution of funds. We have that schedule that was submitted last week. And in terms of but there is a resolution, I think, as a housekeeping matter, we have to move on to the executive committee and the full board. That would be the resolution that we discussed, authorizing the state's attorney's office to disperse the funds immediately once an acceptable application was processed, so that we didn't have to hold up the time frame for that distribution. So I'll discuss that when we get to the resolution section. Is there anything else that we need to discuss regarding the timing of distributions from staff's perspective? I think that was spelled out in the timeline that was provided last week. All right, with respect to the Kane County share of funds, the primary purpose of today's meeting was to take the list that we had received of non-payroll funding requests in light of the prioritization that was provided by the department heads and elected officials, and fit the available requests into available funding that was remaining. And so we had talked, and this was in general terms, about the requests that are before us here in the 11-page document that we had that was $18,721,000, and trying to compress that down into roughly a $12 million number. So yes, $12 million number. So has everyone had an opportunity to review the detailed list that was provided? Essentially, what we need to do is remove items from this list, and I'll open it up for discussion for the committee members as to items that they feel appropriate to remove. Now, again, in removing these items, we're not discussing necessarily whether they're meritorious. It's just a prioritization of what we can do with the available funding. Mr. Franz.
I'm just curious. I guess I'd like to clarify this before we move on. There was a declared emergency, and if I'm not mistaken, during a declared emergency, the sheriff has certain powers to make purchases and so forth during that emergency period. So I guess I'm not sure, but for example, the coroner requested 2 vehicles and we approved 1.
Right.
And it's my understanding maybe 2 were ordered. I'm not sure, but that's one thing I heard. So I guess I want to make sure that if it's up to us, can somebody usurp our authority in favor of an emergency situation declaration? So I don't know if that's, as long as we can make a decision and it sticks. But I just heard some rumblings about that since our last meeting.
Well, I would think that certainly in terms of expending these funds, to the extent they've applied for the funding to pay for these items, well, let me address this a different way. With respect to the elected officials that are here and department heads, are there any items on this list that have already been purchased? Sheriff Hain, are you?
I don't have the list in front of me. Can you direct me to it?
We can put it up on the screen. The sheriff's items were listed as items 44 through 71.
We'll also have coroner on there. We'll have IT, I believe.
Correct, yes.
Other divisions also that I approve
Right.
purchases for.
Right here,
Please.
yes, this is the list, and I guess but I would assume that you would be in charge of the sheriff's list, yes, that starts at 44. Down at the bottom of this page.
Yes, so we can flip ahead. I can say yes to that one.
So that was already purchased?
Yes.
So 44 was, okay. All right, keep going then.
Yes, every item on this list has either been purchased or purchase in process, contract signed for it.
Keep going, then let's go on to the next page.
Yes, purchased.
All right, and then the final page is item up to 76, and then we have 46 that we were discussing as well.
All items except for 46 have been purchased.
All right. And did you, with respect to those, are those funds that were being paid out of your current budget so far or available resources?
So county finance did implement the COVID line item into all of our budget systems. So we were charging it to that COVID line item.
Right.
So it doesn't show a negative out of our general fund budget.
And are there any funds available in the general fund budget to cover these items?
Certainly, we could find funding available.
All right. Sheriff Hain, are you involved in any of the other departments' requests here or
Yes.
familiar with them?
Some, yes.
All right. Which ones would those be by
So the
department?
coroner's office, the purchase of those 2 vehicles
All right.
that
So
he requested in. I
go to
believe
the
it was May.
coroners go back one page. Coroner starts at 11. Ozone's, okay, I'm sorry. There's a number of coroner's items here. Are you aware of any of those items? The 4 items on this page? Yeah.
I'd have to confer with my staff. I know OEM did supply them with a fair amount of PPE that we had purchased independently, not supplied by the state.
All right, how about the next page? Same with the coroner's item. The second vehicle, that was removed from this list by agreement with the coroner. So who, that vehicle's been ordered anyway?
So that request was made of me in May, and we, based on the coroner's request and his statement that his staff is riding around inside the same air as people who have passed from coronavirus, he articulated that he needed 2 vehicles that work like an ambulance that separate his staff from the person that they're transporting. So based on that request, I signed the contract for the production of those 2 vehicles at that time. And then the question has been raised since he was approved for 1, okay, where do we get the money or the approval for that second vehicle from? Because we're operating under a different set of rules, it seemed at that time, and now we have the CAC committee to run these things through.
All right, so what was the plan at that time? When
CRF, Coronavirus Relief Funds.
And the cost of that second vehicle would have been in the range of, let me just see here. It's about $200,000 or $180,000.
Yes, somewhere in that ballpark.
Right. Any other departments other than the coroner's office?
Roger, is there any in IT that I signed for directly on your behalf that would be
I
on this
think
list?
those were accounted for in the initial $1 million approval that you did last month or so.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I think,
So none of those are outstanding?
I
that are in
don't think those
question?
are
Okay.
outstanding.
Facilities maintenance?
Building management then, would that be?
Yes.
Okay. This is on page 1, back at the beginning of the document.
Okay.
And I'd ask, Mr. Sparks, is there anything outstanding? Okay.
So the items under building and management have not been ordered yet? The HV, they have not, okay, all right. Could you go to the next page, please? All right, nothing there either through building management?
No.
Okay. Any other offices or departments?
No.
All right.
Well, this is Barb Jeffers. Wait a minute. We have one for the sheriff, and it's the COVID testing of the JJC and the sheriff that's ongoing. We had to purchase that. That's on our list.
Number page 4.
That's on page 4.
It's under contractual service. It says COVID-19 testing, the expenditures necessary for COVID-19 outbreak testing for the jail and the JJC,
What was the total dollar amount?
100,000.
All right, well, in terms of the committee's evaluation of these expenses, I guess the question is, I had been working under the assumption that a number of these items were all of these items were being presented to us for approval, and that we would go forward based on a pared down list because of limited resources. If that isn't the way that we're approaching this, and a number of the items have already been purchased, given the emergency authority, apparently, that I think then it's more appropriate that we pare this list down really into 2 components. One is to ratify reimbursement for expenses that are committed, and then take those that haven't been done yet out as a separate group and decide which ones we're going to fund. And I don't know, are we in a position to do that today? Is there someone from staff that could help us with that? Or perhaps this list needs to be revised so that we can focus in on those items that are discretionary at this point? What does the committee think? Mr. Frost?
I do like they are prioritized. For example, information technologies has, 1 through 15 already prioritized. So, I mean, we can always start the farthest right column.
Right.
So we could, if we remove the items that are ordered or expended already, and then move backwards on each department on the priority numbers till we get to where we're balanced, I think it would be the way to go. And I also prefer to let the staff who made those priorities tell us what's most important to them.
All right, but do you want to do that today, or do we need more information?
I just don't know that we could do it while we're sitting here live.
Right.
So it
Ms.
might.
Thomas?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for the sheriff. I am very surprised that, we come here today to learn that everything on this list essentially, or that, several of these big ticket items have already been, contracts executed under emergency authority. And I think this warrants more discussion. So I just want to be on the record, and I apologize if this was mentioned at the last judicial public safety meeting. But in May, Sheriff Hayne, you issued a press release saying that you were not going to be taking enforcement action against any one person or entity for order violations. So the governor issued an emergency rule in early August, August 7th, requiring enforcement of orders to disperse and notices of noncompliance. And so I just want to make sure that you are now enforcing these orders to disperse and these notices of noncompliance, which the health department issues when they come across violations.
Is that your one question, or were there multiple questions there?
So I was giving the background, and my question is, are you enforcing these orders to disperse and these notices of noncompliance?
So in May, again, and I've discussed this repeatedly, that is not what my press release said. I said that we cannot enforce it without a judicial order. Then we're more than happy to do so. But we shifted into so many roles that I've talked about, committee upon committee and board meetings upon board meetings, about what we've done in a humanitarian effort as a sheriff's office. So now that, yes, he did just reissue new orders, new rules 2 weeks ago, we worked with our state's attorney's office to determine what we can and can't do. We met with municipal police chiefs by virtual conference last week to discuss how we're moving forward. And yes, we're issuing those compliance notices, and we'll take enforcement action now that we have those teeth behind us.
I'd say, in fairness to the sheriff, Ms. Thomas, this really isn't an issue that's the purview of this committee unless we're dealing with funding for that. That really is appropriate to Judicial Public Safety
I mean,
Committee.
it absolutely is, because if we're approving funding for them to
You're not approving the
assist
funding.
the COVID-19 health emergency, then I absolutely want to know that they're complying with the governor's latest order of August 7th regarding these orders to disperse and these noncompliance orders, notices.
All right, well, we can, I think the sheriff can address that issue as he deems appropriate. But the way this has evolved now, I have a better understanding as to where we're at. Some of these expenses have been incurred or have been ongoing, been incurred during the process. I suppose this committee could choose not to approve or ratify the reimbursement for those expenses, and then we'd have to deal with a budget issue outside of the context of this committee. But as it relates to what our focus is here today, I think it's appropriate to direct staff to revise this document further to deal with expenses that have been incurred or contracts that have been committed already, so that we can focus on those that remain discretionary. And I know Mr. Onzik assisted in preparing this. I don't see Mr. Onzik here, but is there anyone here from our staff that could assist in getting this updated?
And Mr. Chairman, if I could just say, I'm not picking on the sheriff. It's just, this could have been mentioned last week. Oh, everything on the sheriff's list is already kind of in progress, if you will. Other elected officials have internal control. They may have the emergency authority as well, but I'm under the impression that everything on this list has not just been bought, contracts signed for.
I will say that, that it may be a little bit disingenuous for the coroner to say, okay, I'm not going to order the second vehicle. I can do without it if in fact he knew that vehicle was ordered. I share your angst on that issue, but the rest of that, it may be a communication issue more than a substantive problem that we have to deal with. The bottom line is we got to get this issue resolved as we go through the process. And once we approve these, we still have to send them through our staff, our application process for approval. So what I'm going to suggest that we do as a committee is get a further revised report, which breaks down this issue further. And we, to the extent those expenses have already been committed and paid for, we identify those and then pare down what's left so that we can focus on those and determine whether we're going to go forward then. Mr. Surgis?
Chairman, none of this is really sitting well with me right now. And I don't want to be emotional about it, but I do want to ask a couple of questions. These are going to meander just a little bit, but for folks like the sheriff, we began the discussion talking about municipalities trying to turn in their requests versus, and now some of our things are sliding through under emergency orders. Has the sheriff's office, Ron, are you submitting your entire payroll on this, and how have you
We're not dealing with payroll here in this
I
application.
know that, but
So I don't understand.
so
where
my,
you're going
my
with it.
question goes to the original part of the meeting, the first part of the meeting that talked about an extension for those municipalities that are trying to figure out what they can turn in for versus what they can't. How did we handle that on our side of the fence? Good for the goose, good for the gander sort of thing, or two sets of rules? What are we doing?
Director Ronzik asked me to go through our entire staff, so that's 240 first responders, and assess an amount, a percentage of time that they spend between March and December responding to, and of course that's forecasted for the remainder of the year, responding to coronavirus issues. So I submitted that a month and a half ago, and he did a financial breakdown from there based on that percentage. So he has those numbers.
Perfect. Then, and thank you. That was not meant as a dig or anything like that. We're just looking for information because as we sit, my administrators are texting me saying, hey, help us out with this. If the deadline's now moved the 11th, how do we make this happen? So we're just trying to provide some clarity for that. But then personally, I was the one who motioned for the coroner to get his vehicle. Drew, I think you second. We were both behind it 100%. I got to be honest with you. I'm a little bit upset right now if you're telling me somebody had already ordered the vehicle and it really didn't matter what you said. So Cliff, why did you leave your family? Why did you leave your business? Every Monday afternoon for the past month, we've been doing this. And now we're finding out it didn't really matter. And we'll just go and have another meeting. No, I would want this list divided out into what's already been ordered, paid for, expected, versus what isn't, and then let them reprioritize what's there. And I'd be curious to see what we felt as the elected officials, what we felt was truly important versus what they did. Hopefully those are concurrent and we're right on the same page and everything. But based on the coroner's vehicle alone, it seems like we're off on that. And secondly, you know what? I would be willing to call a half-hour recess here if we could divide this list out pretty quick and figure it out what's left that we need to vote on that we haven't already ordered. And I don't mean to sound like flippant or grandstanding, but Drew, when we made that motion to get that coroner's vehicle, there was one principle guiding it. Can you get that ordered with enough time for it to be delivered before the end of the year and qualify for the funding? What was the point of that if you've already ordered it? I mean, truly, I'm feeling a little bit taken advantage of right now, and so I'm just voicing that.
Mr. Frost?
Sheriff Hain, maybe you mentioned this earlier and I missed, but item 46, the large item, the $5 million for the telecommunications, has that been ordered?
It is not.
It is not. So, you know, and the prioritization that was, I guess that's open for interpretation by each department. For example, it looks like IT prioritized their requests, 1 through 15 of 15. The sheriff's priorities are all listed as priority number 1, with the exception of the telecommunications system. We're trying to pare down $6 million. So that's low hanging fruit as far as I'm concerned, but be aware of that. That's the only one that's number 2 on the sheriff's list. And I also think that, we have to, with all due respect, look at some of the fiber optic items that are still left under IT. They were all fairly big items, and we need to go through those from least priority to highest. And again, we could accomplish quite a bit of savings if we knocked just 3 of them out.
Chairman, this is Barb Jeffers. Just to make it simple, the only one that the health department has purchased, and it was unexpected, were the testing. When we had the outbreaks, we had no choice but to, because you can't move the detainees out. So we had anticipated that, so that's why that one's on there. Other than that, nothing else is on the health department's list has been obtained or ordered.
All right, so we have, I suppose we could approach this in 2 ways. One is to get an updated list and reconvene. The other option is to go through those departments where the bulk of the uncommitted expenses are and pare those down by roughly $6 million. Those office or departments are, we've got the sheriff with a $5 million request for radios, communications equipment. We've got IT with a number of projects, and we've got the health department with the bulk of their requests, which are prioritized number-wise, that we could pare down from. And I'll leave that up to the committee to decide what we want to do. Mr. Fries?
I guess I've talked to a few people about I think it was Roger I talked to, and I'm certainly open to a response from the sheriff, but the $5 million telecommunication system, that's to go from standard broadcast type radio, I'll call it, to a digital type system. Now, keep in mind, it's being used today, the old, I'll call it the old system. And it's done well for a long time. And I'm just wondering if that is something it's rated as a secondary priority, if that's something that could be, we could hope for in the future, but get by with, since it is kind of the standard system that's been in use forever. If we could get by without that one, because if we could do that, then I don't think it would be hard at this meeting to come up with another $1 million.
Sheriff, you stood up. Do you want to address the committee on that?
So I think I missed a meeting or two, how we got down to that. We're trying to pare it into 12 million here, but this $5 million state of emergency that continues to happen on a daily basis with our communication system. We're broadcasting private health information now in our new environment caused by COVID. We have numerous letters of support, to include a professional consultant who does this for a living, saying that this is certainly corona related, and it is an emergency. I just struggle to see, sticker shock to me is not an issue at this time, when public safety is my number one concern in public health. And we have the benefit of this funding. So, and the reason why it's listed as number 2, not to get too far down in the weeds, Joe Onzik and I were talking through the fact that it doesn't seem to resonate that a lot of these things on this list, obviously, were already purchased or signed for, because the system that county finance created, it was a quickly put together system to facilitate the CAAC committee, and all it said was request. He didn't have an already purchased option in there. He didn't have any other button to click. So he said, we just wanted to know what you have already processed or what you're asking for. So everything went into one group. And here it sits. So I said, Joe, I can't prioritize anything in a list of 1 to 20 per se, because we wouldn't have bought it if it wasn't a top priority for public health at the time, and it's already been purchased.
Is
So
the telecommunications equipment an all or nothing expense?
we can pare that down, but it's not going to be any less than 4 million, 3 to 4 million.
I would look at it as a pretty much, you're either going to have the new system or not.
Yeah,
there's no
Understand it.
All right, well, you had previously presented the information regarding the benefit that would give us in working with the other agencies as well.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So about 10 days ago, Officer Brown of Carpentersville was kind enough to pull me over and point out my shortcoming and my speed. And when Officer Brown came back to my car, I could hear 3 things that just caught me off guard that I wasn't used to. The first one was that he's negative COVID, and the second two were that he is concealed carry positive. And I found that interesting. And the reason it stuck with me, Ron, was because when you made your presentation, the presentation for these radios was that you had no way to conceal if a person was positive COVID, and that broke grounds, that broke the rules. And I remember sitting there going, quite a stretch to get the radio system, but it would qualify it for COVID. And then I remember explaining it to my wife later that night, and Audrey said one thing: they shoot at Ron and his guys. If he wants radios, get him radios. And I sat there and said, my wife's right. In terms of other things I need to coordinate, I would vote for these radios, and I've now seen it on both sides of the coin. Seems like a stretch to get them, don't know if there's another way around it. On the other hand, if these funds truly are available, this is a guy I would want to support and his men that are out there in the field. And if Officer Brown is out there, thank you, sir.
All right, well, the practical consequence of that would be that we'd have to eliminate, given the fact that many of these other expenditures are already there, eliminate essentially every IT request and every health department request. And that's the
Can we let
challenge we
them
have.
get together and maybe those three can powwow real quick and prioritize this for us, or is this on us to prioritize?
It's ultimately our decision to make, and I don't think that that's going to happen in 5 minutes. If we
Our
could,
decision, but we don't get to choose the coroner's vehicle. They just order it when they want to.
right, well,
I mean, I'm just saying.
we could choose not to
I know.
fund that, and then the coroner's going to have an issue to deal with. Ms. Thomas?
Removing anything from the health department's list is a non-starter for me. This is a health crisis first and foremost. And they need all the resources available to do their job with respect to testing, PPE, contact tracing. And then, of course, they need the citizens of King County and those across the state for us to do our jobs with respect to social distancing and wearing masks. So no, that's not a non-starter for me. I'll be here all day fighting for the health department if I need to be. But what's funny about the radios, I think just kind of, based on what I've heard from my colleagues, we were pretty much all in for that. So the fact that they're not ordered is kind of ironic. But I think we should, Roger is here in the room. I think we need to talk about, as Drew has already said, some of these fiber optic projects. Because they're, get rid, if we can postpone, I'm gonna say get rid of, but postpone 3 or 4 of those, that moves the ball down the field.
Mr. Chairman, this is Bill Leonard. Could I comment?
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, I understand the concern about the radios. However, I think we have a couple of problems that we have to address. Number one, since we do not have an encrypted program right now for our radio dispatch, private health information is going out and being able to be interpreted by anyone who gets on that frequency. And secondly, if we don't do anything on the radio system, we have potentially a very serious liability exposure. And I think we have to look at that too. I know Mr. Frost said this is low-hanging fruit, but considering our liability exposure we've had in the past and what that has done to our costs on insurance and other things, I think the radio system is something that we have to prioritize and have to find a way to do it, because if we don't get the money through CARES, then we're going to have to find the money elsewhere. And it's as simple as that. So that's all I have to say, but I do think that it is a priority because of the liability exposure from personal health information being interpreted by anybody who gets on our frequency. And secondly, by the fact that we have to get this done, because every day we wait, we're leaving ourselves exposed to higher and higher liability exposure. And we do have a consultant who did a thorough study on whether or not it would qualify for CARES money, and it does. So that's all I have to say, but thank you very much for the time.
All right. Well, from a practical standpoint, where we're at right now, again, we can either extend this and get more information, or if you want to take the bull by the horns, I think one approach we could take would be as follows. And Roger, obviously, I don't want to put you on the spot because you're the last person giving a chance to speak here, and you've articulated the need for all these projects and proposals and the importance that they would have. But if we, one approach would be to say, we're going to put value in the prioritization that all the department heads gave us. And as a practical matter, there's 3 departments that have the bulk of the requests, those being the sheriff, sheriff's office, we have the IT department and the health department. And they have prioritized their requests. One approach to try to get to 5 million would be to remove from the health department requests the last three items that they've requested, which were items 18, 19, and 19 on page 5 of 12. Those total $2.6 million, and those were the items that were prioritized as items 4 and 5 that would fund completely items 1, 2, and 3. And then go to IT and the IT requests and fund. Roger actually went 1 through 14 or 15. We could fund 1 through 7 and defer the balance of those items through, defer 8 through 15. The sum total there with some rough math would be about $2.5 million there. And we could pare down the sheriff's radios from 5 million to 4 million. And we could do some math to get to a point where we've at least allocated where we're at. Now, having said that, again, and I don't want to spend the contingency fund, but we do have other resources that could come available as this process unfolds and as municipal applicants don't exhaust their funds, or the not-for-profit grant program or the business grant program has some leftover money, or we don't allocate the balance of the contingency funds. But we could, if we were to take that approach, that would get us within at least an acceptable number given our current budget, knowing that the projects that were not funded would be at least waiting in line, and that those that were funded could go forward and we can get going, because some of the IT projects have to get funded. I know I appreciate Ms. Thomas's request for health funding, but we were very aggressive in approving funding for the health department right out of the gate here. And I know Director Jeffers believes wholeheartedly that all the expenses she requested reimbursement for could be put to good use, but it's an issue of prioritization. And so that's the type of approach we would have to take today to get something to move forward. If it would be the inclination of the committee. The other approach is to get this list pared down, get more specific numbers, and then have presentations again as we prioritize each item. Mr. Frost?
Excuse me. I would be open to, the rough guidelines you just gave us. I like the fact that we'd be leaving here today with a plan. I hate the thought of putting it off another week. And I like the fact that it does leave open some of these things. I do support the radio system. I just don't know that it's, something that we could get done by December. And it's something that was needed, but it's also something that could wait a year or two, or we could do it under a bonding or some kind of capital improvements in the future. So I would support that. And I want the sheriff to know that I do support the system, and I don't want to get pulled over by the same guy that pulled over Mr. Sturgis. Thank you.
Be a deputy next time.
Ms. Thomas?
Director Jeffers is on the phone. I'd like to hear from her with respect to your proposal.
Just one more comment before Director Jeffers addresses the committee. I think one of the bases for the approach I suggested was that every department shares in the process. So it's not, we're trying to do the best we can with the resources. But Director Jeffers, go ahead and if you can address Ms. Thomas's question. And that specific question, to paraphrase or to reiterate, it would be if your items that we were, the items that you prioritized as number 4 and 5, if those 3 were removed, what would the consequence be?
Well, first and foremost, thank you for allowing me to explain this. So as one of the reasons I prioritized these was to look at how we would manage, again, not knowing what's coming around the corner. As you know, this pandemic has proven to be something that we've not experienced, just like the COVID testing. I never dreamed in my mind that we would have to bring people to the jail, which makes sense, you know. So one of the things I'm concerned about is when vaccine comes, and so that's going to take quite an effort of us to disperse vaccines. So if I had to give up something, I could look at 5 for sure, because one of the things you have to realize, once we're sheltering in place, this would give us an opportunity. 5 is something that to reach out to our community who can't come out, or we have to get to them through what we call DOT. It's the direct observed therapy, where we give you medication and we watch actually that you take it. And so giving health instructions through a secure line is what number 5 is. So that's okay. If that one was to go, it just minimizes our reach to the community. Because I can't see yours, so I'll read off of mine. The sheltering in place, it concerns me with that, and we can reduce that one. What I worry about the sheltering in place, once this goes, I don't know if you guys remember, but this would be if we had to approve some additional support, be it the military or healthcare professionals to come in, and they would have to have somewhere to go, or if the hospitals had to give us additional staff to help execute vaccines or medication, this would give people an opportunity not to expose their families as they're engaging. And then the last one, the sheltering support services. As you know, our greatest outbreaks come in our congregate settings, and so these are the expenses. Again, this would be lots of things, from the medication, the vaccines, bringing on site, because people who are in fragile conditions, as you well know, cannot be transported to a inline testing mobile. So I would say I would be willing to give up 5 and maybe a reduction in the 1 of sheltering support, and the sheltering for living spaces for individual requiring isolation. That one could be reduced as well if I had to give up something.
All right, you know, we could, and again, public health is critical, but we have limited resources, and I appreciate Director Jeffers' commitment to trying to keep everyone healthy and safe. The suggestion, the example she gave of having an outbreak that would require, military assistance and housing for staff, that's the kind of emergency that I think we contemplated keeping the contingency fund for. So if there was a change in circumstance with a $5 million fund that we have there, we certainly could prioritize these as expenditures. The hope is that the trend is that we're not going to need that, and that as the time goes on, the severity of the impact of the disease isn't as great as it was in the beginning. And again, I'm not a medical expert. We need to be prepared for that. But if we were inclined to eliminate those 3, we could certainly make them a priority if there was something that were to occur that is not expected at this point, and recognize that the question is, what are the odds of that happening between August 31st and December 31st? Because actually we would have had to pay the money out. It's probably, as a practical matter, from today till December 1st, because we would have to have that money spent by then. So I just throw that out as a thought. Mr. Frost.
Obviously in a perfect world or an easy world, we would just approve everything that was asked. But the fact of the matter is we only have $2 for every 3 that has been asked for. So we have to pare something down. And again, public health and an emergency, they all are meaningful asks. And of course, we don't have a surplus in the county budget to fill the gap. We're trying to whittle down a deficit there. So I like your suggestion, and if it was the consensus of the committee, could we maybe ask those 3 department heads to work with Mr. Anzick and then report back next Monday and see if they can get us to where we want to be.
Well, maybe, let's just do this today now that we're here.
Okay.
All right, let's move on to the IT scenario. Roger,
John, can I ask one
yes.
more question to Ron real quick?
We'll go back to him after we get to Sheriff, okay?
Surely.
All right, thanks. Under IT, Roger, there are a number of requests here. My suggestion eliminated more than half of those requests in number. But if you focused on removing the items that were 8 through, let's see, 8 through 15, what are your thoughts on that? Is there any one of those items that stands out?
For the current list, which we were updated on Friday, I'm trying to find the item number. So number 23, which is at our data center, that one can be removed. It's 427,733. That one is not possible by December 30th.
All right, so that actually was a number 2 priority, but it can't be done on time.
That cannot be done. The permitting will take
Okay.
5 months, they said.
All right.
Based on backlog of permitting. That's in a, not in a county area.
All right. And so that would allow adding back 8 and 9 technically, if we
Yes.
kept the same.
Which those would be very high priority as well. I mean, we numbered ours in order versus giving them all weighted priorities of 1 versus 2 versus.
Sure.
So, let's see. So if you go to, let's see, you said 8 and 9 would be moved, and then so this particular building is priority number 10 or item number 26.
Right.
And that was support for power for this in the event of a power outage. We run a lot of our support for the offices through this building, including tax collection and other things that are going on. Plus all the meetings related to these events and activities are happening in this building. So those meetings using all the virtual and other technology would be postponed if we had a power issue. The servers and storage capacity, 680,688. What we were proposing was to add servers for load balancing and emergency preparedness if we have issues with the server infrastructure that everybody's going against, from health, public safety, courts. We have limited amount of resources. We're using it as best we can, but this was backup equipment for that. Phone system, right now we're having, I would say that one would be an easy one to remove because we're going to run out of time, simply put.
Okay.
The wireless was an alternate to doing fiber out to a backup for the Arterial Operations Center in KDOT and also animal control. They both deal with response issues for public safety. And then item number 25, priority 15, that one can be removed. We're not doing that. That actually coincides with the data center.
All right. So maybe a revised suggestion as it relates to IT that would fit within this same number would be to remove 23 because of the timing issue, but add back in 22, 36, and 26, knowing that the net result would be, instead of 2.6 million roughly, and these are very rough numbers, about 2.3 million, give or take, okay? And if we provided that funding, Roger, would that?
I think that's, considering all the other things you have to address, there's always contingency if we come to something that's can't be done without it.
And then if we dealt then with the sheriff's request for
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, could you just review what we're eliminating from IT?
All right, so the suggestion was to eliminate number 23, which was because of impossibility from timing, and then removing 28 through the end of, so 28, 27, 29, 31, 35, and 25. In other words, if the prioritizations were eliminating 11 through 15 and number 3. Mr. Hanson?
Question about item number, excuse me, item number 39 at the bottom of page 7. That was really a request on the Treasurer's Department. That, if anyone saw the line outside today, makes pretty compelling case for that software to be considered.
Mr., I think there's an answer to your
So
question.
that is actually for the Supervisor of Assessments office.
Okay.
It is for, you know, the types of activities that are happening with your exemptions and the management of parcels in the assessment process. So this is the Board of Review, the assessments, exemptions. Collection is actually online now. You can pay online, you can pay at your bank, you can drop it in the box out back.
So this is Mr. Armstrong's request to create kind of a virtual appeal process where
It was all for property assessment and review, yeah. So the payment process is fully online. I mean, you can pay today from a website.
Right.
They choose to come pay, I think, or they're worried they'll miss the deadline.
Any other questions on the IT request? All right, now back to the sheriff, and I didn't mean to cut you off, Mr. Surges, but if we provided $4 million in funding now and funded all the other projects, there could be some leeway in the sheriff's budget to cover the difference if necessary. Would that satisfy the request to fit this in?
Yes, and what I was going to propose, thank you for giving me the opportunity. So the 3 departments that are asking the most in offices, Health Department, IT, and my office. Of course, everybody wants to prioritize the Health Department. They're in the lead here. I couldn't agree with Ms. Thomas more. And we're trying to wrap around all that support around them. So we've all worked very well together through this. What I would suggest, we do have a very comfortable overage in the sheriff's office budget, that the 3 entities sit down this week and really put our heads together, even if items are crossed off this list here, what the sheriff's office can help buy for the health department, what the sheriff's office can put forward to help with IT, or what we could pull off our own list here to cover in our internal budget and give you a solid response next week.
Mr. Surges?
I mean, I guess the comment was twofold. The first one, I think John Hoshide had said, $4 million. Can you actually buy the system for that?
You know,
You asked for
I'm
5.
up here speaking on behalf of CaneCom for the most part. I'm going to invite Michelle up here to answer that question
Okay.
about what we can and cannot get for $4 million.
Ron, your light is on the back of your phone.
Thank you. So the system that we're talking about, the Motorola Starcom system, the infrastructure already exists throughout the county. I believe there's 10 to 13 sites, correct me if I'm wrong, that it's a state-run system. So the infrastructure, many agencies are already operating under what exists. So we wouldn't be adding additional towers, which is why there was such a difference in cost when we had the 2 quotes that we discussed at prior meetings. The cost associated includes equipment needed for CaneCom, which is our councils, what our operators use to talk to the radios, as well as the radios needed for the sheriff's office and other agencies.
And if you could just reiterate for me one more time, why this is COVID compliant. It's helping you identify. And I think my second communication way back months ago to Barb Jeffers was one of the first responders in my area had reached out to me saying, how do we know? And Barb assured me that that database existed and that the first, you know, if you had a domestic call, you had to go to somebody's house, you knew whether or not, only to find out months later that the way we were communicating that, because it was broadcast through the airs, isn't really compliant with HIPAA and some other things. Is that my understanding on why this is compliant?
Yes, the key point of the system is the encryption. So we've always had a challenge in radio communications on sharing personal information over the radio system. And we have protocols and we have procedures on how we work around that. COVID is different because of the type of contact or the way it's contagious. We met with first responders as well as the health department at the beginning of this to discuss how we would work around this. And we came up with a code that we would use. So our telecommunicators screen every caller, and what we can't control is the officer initiated activity like a traffic stop or something, but we screen every caller, and then we use this code language over the radio. We can't just simply say universal precautions, because that may have to do with another type of communicable, another type of disease or health issue. So we came up with a specific code for COVID, not anticipating that we would have, over 11,000 alerts in our CAD system, and it would, be the effect that it has since had.
Thank you so much.
All right. I think Mr. Sanchez had a question. Mr. Sanchez?
A question and a comment. The question, what is the number we're trying to pare down now? Is it 5 million, 6 million?
It's roughly $6 million. And I think what we could do here, just to try to give, and to follow up on the sheriff's comment, is we could make a recommendation today that we would have redocumented by Mr. Onzik for ratification next week if necessary. And in the interim, if the the elected officials and the department heads involved in the 3 areas could collaborate and come up with a better solution that meets those same financial parameters, we could live with that.
Okay, well, I guess where I'm coming from on this is a little bit more simplistic perhaps, but I'm keeping in mind that we're going to be realizing a lot of savings in the sheriff's office payroll budget. So if we were to take the telecommunication system off of our list right here, right now, $5 million, we could make a budget adjustment in the sheriff's payroll from this year based on the savings that we're going to realize. So we could still pare down this list by $5 million with one item and make it happen in a different way. And then we're just left with another million.
Well, I think that assumes some facts that we don't know the answer to yet.
Which
I
is
think
what?
ultimately the determination of the Treasury regulation interpretation is going to have an impact on your assumption.
Well, what I'm saying is if we take the money for the telecommunications out of the sheriff's budget, we make it a budget adjustment from his payroll, we don't have to worry about it being CARES Act compliant in any way.
Because you're assuming the sheriff has $5 million in unused payroll expense? in
Well,
this year's
yes,
budget?
because there was a lot that was submitted for reimbursement that we had already approved, the payroll expenses that we'd already approved. And when I inquired about this with Director Onzik, it seems we're going to have some considerable savings still in the sheriff's payroll budget. And so that's where we could have that conversation of $5 million coming from there quite easily.
All right, what is the?
Chairman Holshite, I'm sorry, this is Barb again. I'd like to contribute to making it easier. I'm really concerned that every week we don't get ready. We're going to be behind the 8 ball preparing for vaccines. So right now I'm willing to remove 4 and 5 from my list just so that I can moved forward on purchasing some of these things because I'm behind the 8 ball. I'm competing with every health department in the country for some of these things. And you mentioned earlier, if we find ourselves in a situation, there might be other funds. So I would rather just move forward and remove those 3 off my list, and so that I can move forward in preparing us for vaccines and all the things that we're working on now, and not have to worry about not expending the funding because of time.
All right. So the discussion that we've had so far, based on the input from the health department director, the director of IT, and the sheriff, would result in us eliminating the last 3 items on this list from the health department. Those are the items rated 4 and 5. The items rated 2, 11 through 15, 2 and 11 through 15 on the IT list. And with respect to the sheriff's request as it relates to item number 46, reducing that to 4 million. And is that, would the committee consider making a motion to approve that concept so that could be put in more specific numbers, terms to evaluate for a meeting next week and allow our staff
Say that
to-
again slower.
All right. Basically, the action would be to move to approve the list of non-payroll funding requests, detail items here, excluding health department, the last three health department items, the items 2 and 11 through 15 on the IT request list, and reducing the sheriff's request for radios from 5 million to 4 million. So, and with the understanding that we would then have that list put in
And I'm so sorry. I don't-
specific terms for next week's meeting.
What's our spread then?
We'll figure that out when we get there, but it'll be close enough, all right? I don't have the answer right now.
Perfect.
And the reason it doesn't have to be specific today is we're going to give our staff time to get together, to evaluate the numbers, to see if they can come up with a better solution. And that, if we do that, knowing that if we do that, we can get approval of the board to expend those funds, allow the health department to make the commitment to invest the money, allow IT to do it, allow the sheriff to do it, so we can get all these expenditures incurred and funded before the end of the year.
So you're looking for a motion for that?
Yes.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Mr. Franz. Discussion.
Chairman
Hearing none. Yes, someone have a question?
Commissioner Sanchez. I just want to reiterate the idea of utilizing savings from the sheriff's office. Is that not even something we're interested in? I appreciate the exercise we're going through, and it's necessary if we're not going to go that other way, but is that something we just are not interested in at all?
I think we're interested in everything that makes the budget numbers work. I mean, we still have issues to deal with in the finance department in terms of getting last year's budget balanced and this next year's budget balanced as well. So I think those numbers will be relevant in dealing with that issue. So I guess my thought would be that if we have, these are non-payroll funding requests, and what we need to do is have everyone, I think the fair thing to do is share in the process of reducing their requests to fit within the budget we established. So I think that's what the committee is saying here.
Okay, all right. Well, I just see there's an opportunity there. So I resent my communications with Director Onzik for others to review, just in case that's something that we want to utilize, because he referenced possibility of budget stuff, lost revenue, and also this telecommunication system.
All right. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Hanson,
Yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Franz,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Sturgis,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
O'Shea.
Yes. Motion carries. I think and again, the direction is to create a revised list of what we've approved for funding now, compare that to our available funding, see if we're close within the budget, and then have staff communicate so that we can bring back this to next week meeting. Ultimately, then putting something on the county board agenda with the approval of these expenditures or reimbursement for those expenditures. So if we could have that as a placeholder on the county board agenda, that would be helpful. Mr. Chairman?
Just a clarification, a question. I appreciate how difficult the process is that we're currently going through and understand the vote that was just taken. Will the committee hold the small business and nonprofit grant programs to the same type of, and I'm not saying stringent in a negative or pejorative way, but the stringent limits at 8 million and 2 million as the county needs? I mean, we're driving the cuts down to a very specific number, and it makes sense from all the discussion that's taken place here. I did hear in previous meetings that, if we get more applications in the small business and nonprofit programs, then, the hundreds that were quoted that were expected by some, then we'll tap the contingency. If they're going to be held by the will of the committee at the 8 and 2, then I understand the deep, cuts that are being made into what the requests have been. Is there clarification on that, just for the record, just to avoid a problem that would come a couple of steps from now?
I would just say this as one member of the committee, the parameters we set up for the non-county and municipal programs were set based on the expectation that that would be the limit of funding available. However, we haven't made a commitment as to what happens with the contingency fund. So I suppose it's the will of the committee and the board to change their mind as time goes on. But I think the reason we set up the structure the way we did was with the idea that we would be consistent going forward and keep it within those limits. So unless something unusual occurs that we're not aware of, I don't see us changing our mind there. In fact, I think the discussion regarding the business grants was that if we had more applicants than available funds, we would prioritize the use toward those that had been shut down for a period of time. So I think having gone through that exercise, that gives you an indication what the committee's thoughts would be in that regard. Mr. Frost?
Just to sum things up, if my rough math is right, we're at 6.1 million with that rough. So I mean, we're right there. So that's a good thing.
Thought we were close, but
I would like to, I see Mr. Sparks is kind of busy back there, but I guess I'm speaking on behalf of Ricky. The other expenditures, for example, building management and so forth, can we give them a solid answer today that they can move forward with their expenditures? Because I know he has contracts still to get these things done by December.
If we have the unanimous consent of this committee, I would expect that ultimately, subject to getting those expenditures approved through the state's attorney's office process, yes, I would, I mean, ultimately, we need to ratify this through a vote at the full board, which I wouldn't anticipate at this month's board meeting. So we have exec tomorrow? Wednesday. And so, again, we'll have a placeholder for this resolution going to exec to the full board as we finalize the numbers. So, yeah, I would say that we're pretty certain, absent calling another special board meeting, that would be the ultimate approval. But I think we've got a time frame that's close enough to satisfy that.
Thank you.
All right. The discussion on the balance of the funds, I think that's something that is working through development committee. So as far as the new business portion of the agenda, I think there are two resolutions then that we want to consider moving on. One is the resolution we just discussed that would provide for approval of funding of the non-payroll requests from the county within the limits that we established here. And then the second would be a resolution that followed up on the discussion we had previously that authorized the state's attorney's office, once the applications were received and vetted and approved, to move forward with a direction to the treasurer to immediately fund the requests. So that's a separate item. I would just like the consent of the committee to move a resolution to that effect to the executive committee and then to the full board for approval. Is there a motion to that effect, Mr. Frost? Mr. Hanson seconds. Discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Hanson,
Yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Fraz,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Sturgis,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
O'Shea.
Yes. All right, that motion is approved. I'm not aware of any other business that we need to address today. Is there anything else from the staff that you'd like input on? Mr. Berger?
Yes, at this time, we would like to ask you to mark your calendars with 2 tentative dates for future committee meetings. The first one would be Friday, the 9th of October. On that date, we expect that you'll be in a position to make decisions regarding the allocation of funding to other smaller units of government, those being the fire protection districts, the library districts, park districts, forest preserve district, et cetera, townships. And then the next date would be, I believe it's Monday, the 26th of October. And on that date, we're projecting that you'll be able to take action regarding your grants to nonprofit agencies.
All right, so those are the Friday, October 9th as opposed to Monday. We've been meeting on Mondays. Is Friday a more preferred date?
It is in this case because it allows you to send a recommendation to the full county board for consideration the following Tuesday.
Very good. Okay, so we'll circulate those dates, try to pick a time that's convenient for everyone, and look at conflicting meetings, and we'll get back to you on that. All right, for purposes of this committee's work then, do we want to schedule another meeting for next Monday at this time? It would be, pardon? It's Labor Day. It's all right, I work on every, it's not, I'm joking. Mr. Hanson.
Just had a question and a consideration for the proposal of a Monday, the 26th meeting. Is there any chance of running that on Tuesday, the 27th? We're already committed to having a committee of the whole meeting. Can we run that special CAC meeting before Cal instead of another standalone?
All right, we'll finalize those dates. All right, so our next meeting, is it next Tuesday at 2:30?
Is it board meeting Tuesday? Full board's Tuesday,
And,
next Tuesday.
and groundbreaking at the new building there shortly thereafter.
About 6:30 a.m.
You could probably do two.
I'll call anybody, I'll call Surges.
We could do the 2:30 time, but
Well, the issue, I guess, is that the purpose of that meeting, I think we're far enough along in this process that the remaining action item for now was the finalization of the motion that we just passed regarding the non-payroll funding. What we could do, if the committee was inclined, is to allow the process to work, get the numbers together, get them to executive committee for approval in a revised format, subject to getting input from the elected officials, and we could modify the motion on the floor at the full board meeting if there was some tweaking that they collectively agreed to. That would then eliminate the need for our next week's meeting. We'd skip a week. Is the committee comfortable with that?
yes.
Subject
Yes.
to us scheduling a meeting, we could, if something comes up between now and then and we need a meeting next week, I'll notice up a meeting for Tuesday. But I think that may be a better approach at this point.
Mr.
Yes.
Chairman, one of the concerns that I'm having is, Scott, in terms of notifying the municipalities and the not-for-profits, I think we have a system in play. But how are we doing it for the businesses? When does their window open? What is their deadline? How are we communicating that? How can we assist or facilitate that?
I can answer the question. So that program is expected to launch on Monday, the 14th of September. Our expectation is that we would not only announce that through Kane County Connects, but also through an email blast to our chambers and our municipalities. Aside from that, we're open to suggestions.
And John, I think you actually answered this over the weekend. I don't know Fabiola is. Hello, Fab. The questions on this are generically going to you. How do we get to you? If I'm a business who has a question, what number do we tell them to call? Do we have a hotline? Do we have a?
I think I would suggest that we have a general email for this CRF program.
And that would be?
It's on the website, and anybody with questions should contact us through that email.
Okay. So if you click on that puzzle-looking piece there, the corona
Right
piece,
where you see questions. crf@co.kane.il.us.
got it.
And Fabiola is responding to those questions every morning, noon, and night. So
How many are you getting approximately? Like 5 or 500? A day? Okay. Got it. Thank you so much in advance for all you'll be doing.
All right, any further business? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Oz moves. Mr. Hanson, excuse me, seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
Only big issue I see is Labor Day.
We need to have something so he can keep track. He's pretty boy. We need something for pretty boy. Crayons or something. He can keep track of what's going on.
I highlighted everything on that list. Are you going to do the resolution? The one that was